Welcome to this Shelter Success Simplified webinar on tuning up your organization for 2021. This one will focus on increasing the effectiveness of your board and creating a united team. I'm Mark Robison, Senior Consultant with Humane Network and co-host of the Shelter Success Simplified podcast. Our two presenters today are Bonnie Brown and Diane Blankenberg, founders of Humane Network. Humane Network is a nonprofit consulting organization that can help your organization with everything from animal behavior training for staff and to operations and strategic planning. You can also outsource some of your work to us, such as fundraising and communications. The first conversation with us is free. Just contact us at info@humanenetwork.org. You can check out Bonnie and Diane's bios on the Humane Network website and see the rest of our team there too. You can ask questions at any time in the chat window at the bottom of the Zoom window. Ask them as they come to mind and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. Now I'll turn things over to Bonnie and Diane.
Welcome everyone. Today is the second part of our presentation on how to tune up your organization. I'm Bonnie Brown, the president of Humane Network.
And I'm Diane Blankenberg, the CEO of Humane Network.
So thanks so much for joining us today. So today we're going to cover two major topics: creating a unified team. So that will include talking about effective internal communications, people management, and hiring the right people. And then we'll talk about building an effective board of directors. So how to set clear expectations and how to get your board involved in fundraising. And then next week is the start of the last two in the series, Powering Your Journey, and we'll talk about raising the funds you need and increasing public engagement in your organization. So we're going to start off with a quick poll. Do you feel that your team is unified? And the answers are: most of the time we're unified. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not, rarely, or not sure. So most people, 55%, said sometimes we're unified, sometimes we're not. 36% said that you are most of the time, which is really fantastic, and 9% said rarely. Okay, so we're going to jump right into sharing some tips with you that will help you get your team to be even more unified. And we have a whole variety of them, and we'll share them pretty quickly, and you can pick and choose the ones that you think will work best for your organization. One that I like a great deal is this first one, which is simple decision-making guidelines. And what these are 3 or 4 simple, short statements that you create as the management of the organization that will guide your team. And so, you're thinking about your mission and your goals, and you want to really distill those down into something simple and easy to remember that is going to serve as a guide for everyone, from volunteers to staff to, upper management. And these are samples from an organization where Diane and I worked for some years, the Nevada Humane Society, and they worked well for us. And you could certainly use these, or you can create your own based on your own mission. One key, of course, is making sure that everyone on the team knows about the priorities that you've established for decision making. And this way, people can make better decisions on their own and not have to always run to other people for help. A second key element of a strong internal communication strategy are well-run meetings that ideally include two-way dialogue. And I'm not going to take up time today going into this because we've got a lot to cover. We did talk about it in last week's session, so you might want to go back to that and check it out. But well-run meetings and is just so crucial in having really solid internal communications. And we have some tips for that you can check out in part 1. Another thing that relates to these meetings is something that we touched on in the question section after the last session. And we call it one good thing. So at the start of each meeting, each individual in the meeting, or if it's a big team meeting, a representative from each team or each department starts off the meeting by briefly sharing one good thing that happened that week. And this is so incredibly helpful because it sets a much more positive tone and it gets everyone's head off of problems and challenges that you're having, and resets things so we can think about what we're doing right and what works well. And it really also helps everyone on the team learn about each other's roles and have an appreciation for what the rest of the team is doing. It's very easy when you're really busy to just get focused on yourself and your department and your area. And this helps to broaden that perspective for everybody. Another important element, which we didn't mention last time, but it's again, like meetings, it's so important, it's worth mentioning again, is to develop a communication tool, maybe more than one, but you don't want to be sure you don't get overwhelmed with too many different ways of communicating. So if your team is kind of techie and everyone has access to a cell phone, you know, Trello or Asana works well. There's also Microsoft Teams, but there are also low-tech solutions which work well for many teams where everyone doesn't have a computer or access to a cell phone all day. And we have some of them here, you know, whiteboards, posters, emails. Some managers use a binder with updates because if you have a team that's working 7 days a week and you share something, you know, half the team might be off that day. So you need to be sure everyone is able to get caught up. And, you know, lots of different ways you can do that, both with technology, but also with low tech solutions. It's another key element of creating a strong internal communications plan is a customer service guide. And we do have a sample that we could share if that would be helpful to you, but it's pretty easy to create your own. You know, you want to be sure it includes the customer service standards and expectations for your organization. That might include things like greeting people when they come in, and other standards of, you know, promptly getting back to people, that sort of thing. It should also include how to respond to the most common questions that people are likely to be asked. And it should include a directory so that people know where to direct calls or emails, or where to go to get help if they have uh, been asked a question and they're not sure. So just having that customer service guide helps to improve your customer service because it helps people get the right answers to people on a timely basis. Organizational attire. This is the kind of thing that can be really kind of easy to dismiss, but there's a reason why teams have uniforms. It's because it really does help everyone feel like part of a team. And it also has a practical benefit that people who see you recognize you as a member of this particular organization and know who to ask when they have a question. Logo shirts are great, but not every organization can afford logo shirts. So what you could do is just designate a color. Back in the day when we all went out to restaurants, I'm sure you'd notice sometimes that all of the wait staff was wearing, say, black. And the clothing wasn't identical, but it was a color that everyone on the team wore. So you can do that same thing. You could designate a color for volunteers and one for staff. And just, you know, a dress code that makes sense, not too over the top, but, you know, for safety's sake and also for professional appearance, it can really make a big difference for your team and for the impression that they create when people meet them. So I'm going to share a few slides quickly of morale boosters because it is a common challenge in our field that there's an element of stress or even compassion fatigue. And so there are some things that you can do that we've tried or that we know other organizations have tried successfully that we'll share pretty quickly with you here. One is to have the managers serve the staff. Now, right in the middle of the pandemic, that might be a little more challenging, but eventually, you know, we'll get back to some more normalcy. And that, I would have to say, was probably one of the most popular things we did, was have managers prepare and serve the staff their lunch or breakfast. Department contests are popular, if it's tree decorating or Halloween costumes. Bingo games for teams. We have a sample of one on our resource page on our website that you can check out. That can be a fun way, even especially when you're making changes and reinforcing training. A bingo game can be a fun way to do that. And for management to send staff birthday cards and a thank you note, and to celebrate milestones like your work anniversary. Those things are small things, but they really do send a message of caring, that management cares about you. And another suggestion is to create a wow wall where you put up positive comments and letters and happy photos, and that anyone can stop by and see when they have a spare moment. Some more morale boosters is surprisingly to many people are training opportunities. Nothing says we appreciate you like investing in someone to give them training, be it professional development or getting to attend a conference. Right now, they're all virtual, but that investment in sending people to a conference is really an incredible morale booster for folks. They really feel appreciated when you invest in them. Rewards for hitting a goal, like a pizza party or food truck day. Confidential surveys where staff get to give input to management is beneficial. And things like staff picks to promote the harder to place pets, where they get their photo taken with the pet and it's put up or used on social media. And a few more, making goals visible and tracking progress and really celebrating those successes really does help staff morale. People feel good when they're accomplishing great things. And so you can use those tools to help point out what is being accomplished by all their work. The leader can go to the effort of pointing out how everyone contributes to successes. So it's easy if you hit your adoption goal to clap for the adoption staff, but you need to realize that all of the animal caregivers, the clinic staff, the folks who are cleaning the facility, everybody is contributing to that success, not just one department. The person who pays the bills, everyone is contributing to the success. And sometimes it's important for the leader to point that out and be sure that everyone feels proud of the success and not just the department that might most obviously be associated with the success. Activities that the team can do together, again, a little hard right now during the pandemic, but things like making toys for the animals or tie-dyeing t-shirts for a promotion that the team gets to do is fun and brings people together and makes people feel appreciated. And lastly, we would recommend some sort of employee recognition program. However, the traditional employee of the month picked by the bosses is really not the best way to go. You can develop an employee recognition program where the feedback of their peers is as or more important as the feedback from their bosses. And this is a really wonderful thing to undertake. There are several virtual versions of this. Kudos and Cheers for Peers are two that you could check out online, but you can also design your own program. And on Friday after the session, we'll send you a sample of a simple program that you could devise that involves the staff, not only in nominating people for recognition, but in actually selecting who is recognized. So it's a really cool program that really makes a big difference in morale.
Okay, so Bonnie's turning it back over to me. And the second category for tuning up your organization is about people management. And there's certainly a lot of good ideas that we wanted to share with you that will help in this area. So the first thing, and Bonnie mentioned that a little bit earlier, is recognize the good works of team members. But often we do things that we would like, or we do the same thing for everybody, and it may not be the way somebody wishes to be recognized, and in some cases can even be embarrassing. So you just want to be sure that you are cognizant of what others like as far as how to be recognized. And we're going to talk more about the platinum rule. But Mary Frances Winters, quote here is to follow the platinum rule, which is to treat others the way they want to be treated. So we have a personality or behavioral style self-assessment that you can do with your team. And this can help you understand basically how people do want to be treated, and also how you are coming across to other people. So the benefits of it are that it helps the people to understand, and you to understand, how their particular style impacts other people. It shows the degree to which people see, feel, or experience things differently, which obviously we all do. It helps you gain insights in how to work more effectively with your colleagues. And it provides opportunities for coaching team members so that they can flex their particular style for greater success. So we have created a version of this to relate to our field, and it's called Which Animal Are You? So there are 4 different styles here, and the chart tells you a little bit about what these mean. So if you notice the green, horizontal green line, it goes from indirect on the left to direct on the right. That's basically looking at how indirect or direct you normally are in your particular behavior. And from bottom to top in the blue line, it goes from self-contained to open. Are you more self-contained in your interactions and your behaviors? Are you more open? And when you combine these 2 lines, you create the 4 quadrants. In the upper right, you have the faster paced, more direct style that focuses on relationships and is more open, which we call the chimpanzee. In the lower right, we have the lion, who is also fast-paced, but tends to focus more on tasks than relationship, so is direct and self-contained. And in the upper left, we have the golden retriever, which is the slower pace. And it doesn't mean that they are slow in a derogatory sense. It's about just the pace of how they process information and what they enjoy as far as being able to work at a particular pace that's going to bring out the best in them, I guess you could say. And their priorities on relationships, along with the chimpanzee. And then in the bottom left, we have the fox. And again, it's that indirect, slower paced, and focusing on tasks and self-contained. So if you look at these 4 and how, and I realize this is a very brief description, and we do have handouts that we're going to provide to you when we send you the PDF of this presentation that will give you way more information. But just looking at this right now, think in your mind, where do you think you fall most of the time? Which one of these 4 quadrants do you think is you? Okay, so we're going to do a poll that asks you that very question. And based on what you've seen so far, which animal do you think best represents your style? The golden retriever, the chimpanzee, the fox, or the lion?
Okay, we have the results are in. I'm going to share those results now. It says, based on what you know so far, which animals do you think best represent your style? We have a few golden retrievers at 6%. The majority are chimpanzees at 38%. And we have our share of lions at 56%. And the foxes did not make an appearance at 0%.
Interesting. No foxes, huh? No analytical folks in this particular, at least as far as what your self assessment is. And like I said, we're going to provide an actual inventory questionnaire that will allow you to look at what, according to this particular model, your style is based on how you answer the questions. And the majority, you said, I think, were the lions, which probably isn't surprising. And a lot of people probably that are on this webinar are in leadership positions, and that totally makes sense. So it's not new news that you get more of what you reward, and you know, that's certainly true with our pets. It's true with people too. What's sometimes not realized though is that we get unintentional um, behaviors when we're reinforcing them indirectly. So that could be either that um, we don't correct things that are maybe not going well. So by basically inaction, we are condoning or supporting or rewarding that particular behavior. Or sometimes we're giving a lot of attention to a problem situation, which can also feel like it's being rewarded again in an indirect way. So how we address performance issues with an individual really impacts everybody in the organization. And we need to be prompt with our addressing if there are particular problems, and be sure that we are then helping to create you know, a positive climate or culture for the organization or the team as a whole. Um, Another thing that's important that goes along with this are performance evaluations. But in many organizations, I don't think do them or even do them if they do particularly well. But even if you do, that's really not enough. You need to have regular understanding and conversations of what the expectations are for individuals and for teams as a whole. They need to be clear, and you just need to give regular feedback so that people can correct and adjust. It's also important to create a culture of accountability. And again, even if you have clearly defined expectations and even have goals, if there's no accountability for making sure that they are reached, and there's no feedback on what isn't working, then it really doesn't matter. So here's some ways to help create a culture of accountability. Bonnie talked about walk the talk in a previous webinar. Again, just defining the results and expectations that you want. Make sure you have buy-in, and sometimes to do that, it's better to create them with others. Certainly, it's totally valid as a leader or a manager of an organization to define what some of those are, but sometimes how they get accomplished can be done in many ways. And if we engage the people that we're working with or that we're leading, it can help gain buy-in there and commitment to making it happen. Need to be open to feedback too on your end, so that maybe things really aren't working, your expectations aren't working. And they obviously can have really great ideas of how you can adjust for the sake of the organization as well as the individual. Sometimes employees need to be coached on not only how to be held accountable, but even how to accomplish what it is that they've been tasked to accomplish. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there needs to be consequences if things aren't going well, and there needs to be reinforcement of the things that are going well. And ultimately, you hope that your team is really holding each other accountable, and that's why I think it's really important to have team goals that really forces the individuals to understand that they need to work together and to be able to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish collectively. So I'm sure we've all experienced hiring somebody that we thought was going to be awesome for a particular role and find out it really wasn't a good fit. So this is just so key, is getting the right person. And often though it's challenging, obviously, if you've experienced that. James Collins has a great quote here that I love and keep in mind all the time, is get the right people on the bus and in the right seats and the wrong people off the bus. And then Ray Kroc says, you're only as good as the people you hire. So we want to be sure we really are getting qualified people, but also that they're doing the right job. They're the right fit for the position. And we'll talk about that a little more in a minute, but it's really for their sake, for your sake, and for the organization's sake that this is, absolutely critical. So job descriptions are one way that we can at least focus on the things that are really required for a particular position and help you hire the right person, and obviously ultimately also help you manage the performance. And one thing that some organizations do and others don't do is have job descriptions for volunteers. And I believe that it's really critical, especially for the key positions, and that they're communicated and that they're managed in the same way that you manage staff. And I think it goes a long way to making sure that, again, that the expectations are clear and that those volunteers are meeting those expectations, and you're able to manage their performance too. So getting the right person on the bus, as we mentioned, is critical. And there is a particular method of evaluating a candidate's qualifications for a particular position, and it's divided up into 3 areas. Can they do it? Will they do it? And are they a fit? So this is something actually I learned years ago in my corporate work when I was doing recruiting for the organization, and went through some specific training for hiring there. But it's been extremely helpful in this field too. And one of the things I think we focus on more than the other 3 is the can do, not so much on the will do or the fit, and they're all equally important. And we're going to talk a little bit more about each of them here. So the can do factors are evaluated based on, past work experience or their education and training in particular skills, whether it's technical, analytical, or communication, or they might have some particular certificates of training in the areas that you're looking for. So this one is easier to evaluate, which I think is one of the reasons why we focus on it more. It's just more tangible and easy to see if people do or do not have that ability to do the job. You can also have people work in a kind of a temporary fashion to try it out, the position, and you can actually see them in motion. So the will do factors are a little harder to evaluate. They include motivations, interests, goals, their drive and energy, and their reliability and stability. So there's less tangibles here. It's more challenging to have them, to put them in any kind of test format, but this is equally important. They can have all the skills in the world, but if they're not motivated or have the drive and energy to do it, it isn't going to matter. And I think in our field, we move at a very fast pace often and have to juggle a lot of things at the same time. So this is particularly important. And then the third category are the fit factors. And this has a lot to do with their own personal or behavioral style, how they interface with other people, how they work in a team environment. And also, so it's a fit with the other members of your team, but it's also a fit with the culture of your organization. And this field is not for everybody. And you want to be able to make sure that people can handle the stresses of it. And it's challenging just to keep up with the emotional stresses that go with it on a daily basis. So we talked about this before in one of the previous webinars about having interviews for key positions. And there are 3 particular ways, or rather stages of interviews that we think are important, and what we do both for our own hiring, but also when we're working with clients. And again, these are just for the really high level leadership roles. We actually do 3 rounds of interviews. First, there's a 30-minute phone screening where we ask some, some high-level questions, really find out if they have the basic skills that would be needed and the basic desire for the job. And that helps us weed out some people that don't, so we're not spending extra time talking to everybody, and especially if you're getting a lot of candidates. The second round is a 1-hour video conference. And we did video conferences even before COVID for this, because it's easier, and it depends on the type of position that you have. You may be interviewing people, especially if it's like for executive director position, that don't even live in the area. So you're not going to be able to see them in person even once we're over COVID. But here's an opportunity to put together a panel from your team and actually talk to more people that maybe are on your management team to get some different perspectives. It could be other stakeholders involved also. And you're going to go deeper into specific questions about the position. And then finally, hopefully you've narrowed down to just the top 2 or 3 people that you think are the really strongest candidates from your batch of applicants. And if you can, even now, do safely in-person interviews. But with some of our clients, we've actually done video interviews for this particular phase of the process also. And this is again an opportunity, if whether it's video or in person, that you can actually set up a process where you can have more questions, more in-depth questions, but also maybe some casual time where they can spend with peers and staff to get to know them and make sure that that there is that fit with the team. And even setting up, often we've done this like with executive directors, it could be a half day or even a full day where somebody takes them out for lunch, so you can see people in a more informal, really informal setting, and when they're just socializing, and often can see a different side of people. But anyway, we have more specific information on this, and certainly something we do regularly is to help recruit and hire people for high-level management positions in animal welfare organizations. So we're going to do another poll. So when you interview job candidates, do you ask questions that get them talking about specific past situations and experience and how they handled them? Yes, sometimes, no or not usually, not sure, or not applicable. And again, Lori will read off the responses once she closes the poll.
Okay, here are the results of our poll. When you interview job candidates, do you ask questions and get them talking specifically about past situations? Far and away, our leader is yes, 69%. Sometimes is 19%. And not sure or not applicable is 13%.
Were there no no's?
There were 0 no's. Everybody.
All right. Well, that's great that we got 69% on the yes, because we definitely recommend that method. And for one of the major reasons that's quoted here on the slide that you're looking at is that past behavior is the most reliable indicator of future behavior. So if you can get people to talk about specific situations that they encountered in the past and how they handled them, they're going to really reveal better how they might handle that same type of thing with your organization and then in the future. And so most of you said you already do this, so you may probably have sample questions that you personally like to use or your organization likes to use. But here's just a list of some that can help you examine specific scenarios from their past. And I'm not going to necessarily read them off here. You will get a PDF of this presentation. But again, it's about asking how they did do something rather than how they think they would do something. So, and ask for really specific examples. I know we use this method a lot, and people, even when I ask for specific examples, tend not to give them. So usually I follow up and ask them to think of something in particular where they had this particular experience from their professional career. So interviewing is challenging. A lot of people do not like doing it, but one of the things that I found that a lot of people do that don't have particular experience in it is that they end up using it as an opportunity to sell the organization or to sell the team or to sell the cause. So they end up talking a lot. So the ideal interview is where you are listening way more than you're talking. And that's why you want to ask those, open-ended specific questions so that you're not getting yes or no answers, but you're really getting people to candidates to open up. I like to use the 80-20 rule that, 80% of the time they're talking versus 20% of the time that you're talking, and even less for you if that's possible. But I think one of the reasons why people don't enjoy doing interviews is that they don't have the process and they don't have a good understanding of what kinds of questions they ask and how to evaluate those answers. So having a process in place will help you be more comfortable, and it'll also help you be more successful in determining if a person really is the right fit for the particular position that you're hiring for. So what are you looking for in a candidate? List some things here that are very general. For a general, and what I mean by general is for like all positions, and not maybe as specific, but we can talk about others in a few minutes as far as when you are narrowing down to a specific position. But obviously some of these things we've talked about before, but they probably seem like no-brainers. You of course would want all these things, but again, how do you actually make sure that you're getting these things? And that's why asking those really key probing questions, especially about past experiences. So the first four, I guess the first five here are, like I said, more general. Make sure they do have the right energy and drive and enthusiasm, and really support for the cause is what's going to create that drive often, and that enthusiasm. Everything we do in our field is dependent upon relating to people, and the animals really need us to be able to work with people in order to be able to provide either whether it's adoptive homes or whatever other services we're providing for the animals. And of course we are helping people with their particular issues. So customer service is absolutely key in every position. Bonnie talked about communication and certainly the interpersonal skills. I really love an attitude of continuous improvement. People who are really looking to how to make things better, how to make things easier, how to save more lives is really critical, and it is a particular mindset. Sometimes we focus a lot on whether a person has worked, excuse me, in animal welfare before, rather than those top 3 or 4 bullets. I believe that a lot of what we do in animal welfare can be taught easier than you can teach some of those personality or behavioral traits. So don't put too much on the animal welfare experience. Most of us came from some other profession or career, and we want to be sure we're open to other people that maybe have that commitment and drive for the cause and don't know necessarily a lot about the organization or the field, but can learn that. So sometimes we're looking for specific positions in a management role. So we need to be sure that they have the skills and that they have the experience and can lead their team that they would be leading successfully. Decision making is important. Need to be timely and efficient and understand how to track the things that need to get done, how to make good decisions, and how to guide their team into implementing those decisions. Fundraising, sometimes we're looking for a particular role that would require them to be doing fundraising and relationship building. So it's important that they have that particular experience. And then the final area here is budgeting. This is sometimes hard to judge also, because some people have had budgeting experience with very large organizations that are, have multi-million-dollar budgets, and others have, managed a soccer team with a a very small budget. So you want to be sure they have the experience that kind of is going to match the need of your organization. And that kind of goes with the management skills too. We often ask what's the largest budget that they have managed, or what's the largest number of team players that they've managed or have reported to them directly. This one is controversial to some people as to far as what the benefits is. That is asking for and calling references. It's often felt that a reference is only going to be used if they're going to give them a positive result, and that a lot of people are uncomfortable saying anything but positive things. But I still find that it has value. And this is the set of questions that we use. And like I said, both for our hiring, but also when we're working with clients and helping them hire people. It only takes like 10 to 15 minutes, but it's amazing what people will tell you. And this just gets them talking about their specific experience with working with the person. You want to be sure that you're getting references that are professional, so it's not friends and family, and preferably it's people that they've worked directly for, so they really understand what it was like to supervise that individual. So we do references, and again, we usually only do them though when we're getting down to the final few candidates. And what I found that sometimes everything's glowing doesn't tell you as much as if they give you some background information that might create some red flags that you want to maybe look into further before making an offer to that individual. And then the final thing in this category of people management is onboarding, and the hiring the right person is onboarding the new staff. A lot of times people are hired and they're just kind of thrown into the job. It's more than policies, paperwork, and forms. They might have them fill out the form. Sometimes they don't even share policies, but you want to be sure that everybody really understands what the organization is about, why it exists, what it's trying to accomplish. There's certainly safety and animal handling training that should be for everybody, and hopefully you're doing that with your organization. We do actually have Kelly Bolin that works with us on our consultant team that provides excellent training in this area for your team as a whole. But you want to be sure that when new people are coming on board, that they're brought up to speed. You want to be sure they meet everybody, that they understand who the players are, who's on the management team, what are the different departments, what does the facility look like, where are things located. Sometimes you can hook an individual up with a specific person that could be their kind of ongoing hands-on mentor while they're coming up to speed in their role. And then you want to be sure you do check in with them and make sure they have what they need to be successful, that they're comfortable, and that their questions are getting answered. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Bonnie, who's going to talk about the next category, the board of directors.
So we're going to talk about your board of directors, and we're going to start off with another quick poll. Do you feel that your board of directors is effective? So yes, most of the time they are, sometimes, rarely, or maybe you're not sure or it doesn't apply to you. So the two of them are tied. People who feel that sometimes their board is effective, and folks who either aren't sure or it doesn't apply to them. Those are both tied at 38%. And then the other two are tied at 13%, and that's yes, most of the time and rarely. So that is fantastic that 13% have an effective board. That's really wonderful news. We're going to talk about a few things that can hopefully help you out here. But before we do that, I wanted to share with you the results of sort of similar questions from the Stanford University survey of nonprofit board members. So this was asking actual board members, and unfortunately 27% of the board members that were surveyed felt that their colleagues, their other board members, lacked understanding of the organization's mission and strategy. So that means over a quarter of their colleagues they felt really weren't too clear on what was going on. And over 50% of them felt that their colleagues lacked an understanding of their role and responsibilities as board members. So this gives us some insights into some of the things that board members need to know. And it also can help you feel not so alone if you realize that, you know, maybe this applies to your board. So answers with boards of directors are not always as black and white as one might think. The role of a board actually evolves and changes as the organization grows and develops. And so while there are some things that apply to all boards, there are other factors that depend on where your organization is at in terms of its growth and development. So, you know, you hear people throw around terms like it's a governance board or we're a working board. And when an organization is young and starting out, it is almost always a working board because there's rarely enough money to hire a big staff and have just a governance board. The board members are the people who created this organization typically and are working really hard to make it successful. So initially, most boards are working boards. But eventually, once you get down the road ways and you're ready to hire staff and the organization is growing rapidly, it's beneficial for the board to evolve and shift and move into being a governance board. And finding when that is, it's often helpful to get some outside perspectives on it. And of course, you can hire consultants. We do that kind of thing, but often that's, you know, not something that's workable for a smaller organization. So sometimes you can find someone willing to volunteer their time who actually has those skills in your community. It might be a volunteer with SCORE, which we mentioned in the previous session, or another executive director or another board president in town who might be very skilled and able to help facilitate things. So this is a short list of what every board member ought to know. And this, it doesn't matter the size of your organization. Every board member needs to know, obviously, the mission, the goals, and the strategies. And board members have some specific requirements. Some of them are actually dictated by your state, and they differ slightly from state to state, but typically there are 3 of them, and it's something along the lines of duty of care, loyalty, and good faith. And there are detailed definitions of what those mean, but being a board member actually does come with some legal responsibilities. And also your group either has or should have some requirements for board members, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Board members should have the bylaws and they should know about major policies. For example, what is your shelters admission policy or your euthanasia policy? Board members should be able to answer basic questions like that. Board members should know about your annual operating budget and the financial status of the organization. They should be aware of the full fundraising plan. And they need key statistics because they're going to be viewed by others as experts on the organization, and they should be functioning as ambassadors. So you want to be sure they know what to say when they're talking to people. So, you know, understanding the key programs that and services that your organization delivers and understanding the key messaging is really important. And we'll talk more about that. Another key thing that every board member needs to understand is the difference between board and staff roles. And a lack of understanding of that creates a lot of problems. And so when groups are starting out, I typically recommend that they, even though nobody is paid, that they start with this fundamental understanding that you're a board member when you're in board meetings and when you're an ambassador in the community, and that when you're doing stuff at the shelter, you are at the organization or as part of the organization as a volunteer, that you're really in a different role. And even if you can't afford to hire a director or executive director, it's good to have someone who has that title, and so that you're functioning in a healthy, functional manner from the get-go. And then as the organization grows, you don't have a traumatic shift at some point between the governance role and the staff, even if the staff is unpaid volunteers initially. So this, I'm not going to read all this. You'll get a copy of this presentation eventually, and we'll share that with you. But it is really important for board members to understand the difference between their high-level governance role and the role of staff, which is an implementation and the how of how things get done. So we're going to talk a bit about preventing problems. There are things that you can do that will help head off issues before they occur. And a board member contract, which includes really clear expectations, including fundraising expectations for board members, can be really helpful. And we do have a sample board member contract that we can share with you. The president of the board needs to then hold people accountable. Just like with staff, accountability for board members is important. And the easiest way to do it is to kind of set up routine mechanisms where you're checking in, because nobody likes to really, confront someone on a problem. But it's really important, because just having something on a piece of paper, if nobody ever pays attention to it, isn't going to help the organization. And another thing that's really important is to at least have terms of office, but to think about adding term limits to your organization's bylaws for board members. At the very least, you want terms of office so that there's a clear start and end to the board member's service time. That's important because it gives you an easy off ramp if there are problems. If you have a problem board member, or just a board member who maybe once was good, but now isn't able to fulfill their responsibilities due to lifestyle changes or whatever, having terms of office so that there's a clear ending and beginning of terms gives you a chance to gracefully move someone off the board without an uncomfortable, discussion. So if you are having problems with your board, one of the best ways to deal with them is by having the board members talk to the other board members. So if you're on the board, that's great. You can be one of the people who help solve issues. But if you are the executive director or the CEO and you're having board problems, the best thing would be to find an ally on the board. And ideally that person is the board president, and they are, as peers with the other board members, much better suited to have conversations with other board members about addressing issues than you may be as the executive director or staff person. You can also consider outside consultants. As I mentioned, you can find someone local or folks like us who can help you. There are also some self-assessment tools for boards out there that can sometimes help get the board on the right path. And we can recommend some of those to you too, if that's of interest. And another way to deal with board problems is to increase the board. And you want to be, just having more board members doesn't fix a problem, but having the right people on the board and getting the right people on the board can. So you want to think about that. And we do have help for you if you are trying to recruit board members. We have a process that works very well. We help people do it, but we also are happy to just share the process so you can do it. And just like with staff, onboarding for new board members is really essential. And so they need these clear written expectations, and they also need to be reviewed verbally, because as Diane mentioned with staff, you need to get a commitment from the person. And it's good to have the board contract actually signed and to be sure that you talked it through with them and they are good, they understand, and they're going to do it. You have that agreement up front. Then if there are problems, you can always refer back to the commitment, the discussion that you had. A tour of the facility, if there is one, and time with the executive director or CEO and the president is really important for new board members. so that they can ask and you can answer their questions. And at the bottom, I have 2 excellent resources for boards and for executive directors or CEOs that can be really helpful to you, Blue Avocado and Board Source. So we're near to wrapping up here, and I want to share one last thing. One of the most common complaints we hear is that the board does not help with fundraising. And there are ways to get board members fundraising. One of the best ways is to get an agreement that they will fundraise. And this can be done, before they get on the board, ideally, but it can be done with an existing board if you have board members who will help support that push. Getting board members to make personal gifts, that can be a requirement, and it's an excellent one because that's one of the fundamentals of fundraising is contributing yourself. And getting board agreement that they're going to participate in events or fundraising campaigns that the organization has. Other easy ways that you can lead your board into fundraising is getting them to commit to engage with donors at events. You can even assign board members to specific donors so that they meet with them and talk to them and thank them. Board members can accompany you for meetings with donors if you're the executive director. Board members can write handwritten thank you notes to donors. That is a very impactful thing that can really help the organization. They can help you with making connections, making introductions to people. They don't have to do the ask. They just need to make the acquaintance so that you can connect with the person and cultivate a donor. Board members can help with soliciting auction items or prizes. They can help by speaking at community engagements that you might have, like say giving a talk to the Rotary. Some of these can even be done virtually throughout the pandemic. And sharing on social media and via email. I just heard a great story about a board member that was told that they needed a new washer dryer, and she went on her Facebook page and told everyone that they needed a washer dryer. Here's how much it was going to cost, and in no time at all, the board member had raised the money. And you can help board members by suggesting what they should share. This was a very, on top of it board member who just figured out how she would do that. But you can coach people to do that. And another great thing that board members can do is participate in thankathon calls. Board members can be given a list of high donors and they can call them to thank them. They don't have to ask them for money, just call them and thank them. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Diane.
Yes, and wrapping up, just to review, this was part 2 of tuning up your organization, and we covered specifics related to creating a unified team and building an effective board. And certainly any additional information, as I said, we will be sending some things out, but if you have additional needs for your specific organization, please reach out to us. And I'll give you the information to do that in a second. Want to be sure you plan to tune in with us next week. It'll be part 1 of Powering Your Journey, where we'll talk about raising funds that you need for your organization. And part 2 will be the following week, and is how to increase public engagement with your organization so that you can help raise even more funds. So here's our contact information. I'm going to let Mark conclude. I think we're basically out of time as far as questions, but what I would suggest is that if you put any questions in the chat, if you could also provide your contact information, we can answer your questions directly. And I'll let Mark conclude this session.
Okay, well, that does it. If you didn't get a chance to ask the question, you can always email us at info@humanenetwork.org if you think of something later. And on Friday, I will send you all a recording link of this session, plus the supplemental resource documents that Bonnie and Diane mentioned. And we appreciate the time that you took today for this webinar. And thank you for the work that you do helping animals.
And we want to be sure that we emphasize that this was made possible by the Petco Foundation. And the Petco Foundation is creating a national lost and found database for vets pets. You can learn more about that initiative by visiting petcofoundation.org/lostpets. So I thank you too for joining us. Appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next week.